Thank you. I'm really happy to be here today. I'm going to be talking about the impacts of roads on the behavior of caribou. So, as you already know, many human activities have negative impacts on the behavior of animals, and caribou in particular seem to be really sensitive to human disturbances like mining, commercial logging, or other industrial developments. But what we often forget is that all these economic activities are linked and depend on an efficient road network. And these roads also have their own impacts on the behavior of animals. So that's what I'll be talking about today, the impacts of roads. So there has been several studies about the impacts of roads on caribou. So we know that, for example, caribou may show increased vigilance near roads. We know that roads may be barriers to the movements of caribou. They also may be barriers to their dispersal. And we know that caribou may avoid roads by several kilometers. So these are few examples of the studies that were made on the impacts of roads on caribou. But what we don't know is if there is a relationship between the intensity of the disturbance that is found around roads and the strength of the avoidance by caribou. In fact, there hasn't been much study that could relate the intensity of disturbance and behavioral reactions in large mammals, and this could really help us to better mitigate the impacts of humans on caribou around roads and around any other human infrastructure. So what we did to study this idea that maybe more disturbance equals more avoidance is we took advantage of a road modification project, a major road modification project that took place in the province of Quebec. So it's a 200-kilometer highway that was modified beginning in 2006. It was a one-lane highway or provincial road, and it's now a two-lane highway, so it's 3 times larger than before. And there has been a lot of construction sites that were created here and there along the highway during the construction project. So what we did is we studied the behavior of caribou before, during, and after this modification project. So our main ideas were that maybe caribou would react more strongly to a larger highway like would be found at the end of the construction project than to a narrower one based on maybe higher disturbance. We also measured traffic densities and the presence of construction sites. So those are other measures of the intensity of the disturbance found around this highway. So again, we predicted that higher traffic densities will lead to maybe higher or stronger behavioral reactions by caribou. Same thing for active construction sites. So we studied a population of what we call, I don't know why, forest-dwelling caribou. It's a boreal ecotype. In Quebec we call it forest-dwelling. So it's not in the continuous population, but in the little, right here, little shot-of population. So it's isolated from any other population of any woodland caribou. So this is a close-up of the study area. In the dashed line is the caribou range, and you can see that the highway crosses the caribou range in its center. So it's a study area that is intensively managed. There is a lot of commercial logging outside of the national parks. There are a lot of forestry roads. I'm just adding this here. This is what we're working with. Dense road network of forestry roads. So although I'm only talking about the impacts of this highway, we've been studying the impacts of other roads in the study area and of logging also. So all these impacts might be cumulative and have impacts on the behavior of caribou. So we're using GPS telemetry monitoring. We captured 53 individuals from 2004 to 2010. We equipped them with GPS collars, so we had 37 females, 16 males. So we always had between 20 and 30 individuals that were monitored each year. And I forgot to say that this is a very small population. There are about 80 individuals in this population of caribou. So having this large database really helped us to study the behavior of caribou during this gradient of human disturbance. So we used many complementary methods to study the behavior of caribou. We looked at movements, we looked at resource selection, and we looked at the distribution of caribou locations relative to the highway. So for movements, we quite simply measured the number of crossings that caribou did, but we also looked at the movement rate of caribou crossing the highway, as well as a few time steps before and after the crossing to see if there was a change in the movement rate of caribou when they were approaching the highway. So what I call time steps is simply a line that we draw between two locations that were separated by 3 hours, so we had locations every 3 hours. So this represents a few hours before and a few hours after the crossing. We compared each pair of, we looked at different differences between each pair of time steps to see if there were significant differences in the movement rate of caribou. We also did resource selection functions on all caribou in the population that we monitored. So we looked at the selection of different vegetation classes, of topography in the home range of individuals. But we also wanted to see what's happening with the road. So we added a variable that was an interaction between the distance to the road or the highway and the construction status of the road, either before, during, or after. So what we wanted to see is if our caribou farther away from the road during construction sites or after when the highway is larger. The first thing we saw when we started the study is that most caribou in the population are avoiding the highway or are simply too far away from the highway to react to it. So we also had to, we wanted to see a reaction to the change of this highway, so we had to do small scale analysis next to the highway to see, to measure a difference in the reaction of caribou. So what we did is we did different road buffer zones. We chose 1.25, 2.5, and 5 kilometers road buffer zones that were encompassing the highway. But the results for all these zones are quite similar, so I'm only going to talk about the 5 kilometer zone today. Keep in mind that the results are the same when we get closer to the highway. And so we did RSFs in these road buffer zones, so we constrained our resource selection analysis in these zones. And we also looked at the distribution of caribou locations in these zones. So what we did is we considered locations as frequency counts in and out of the zones, and we compared the proportion of locations before, during, and after road construction. So for the results, the first result is quite simple. It's simply the number of crossings of the highway, but it's also a relevant result. So only 12 individuals crossed the highway during our 7-year project out of the 53. And these 12 individuals only crossed 93 times. So that's a little number of crossings. We did compare this to, we draw random roads that were similar to the highway that was modified elsewhere in the landscape, and compared it to this number, and we saw that this number was smaller than what would be to the number that we should see if the movements of caribou were random. We also did a Spearman correlation on the number of crossings and years, and the number of crossings seemed to decrease with years. Yeah, so it could be due to the progression of the road modification, but we're not sure. So for caribou movement rates, what you see here, it's a graph. In Y, you have the mean movement rate of caribou, and you can see the different time steps before. And the black bar here is the T0, is the crossing of the highway, the time step that is crossing the highway, and the time steps after. So it seems that caribou are increasing the movement rate. They cross at a very fast movement rate, and then the movement rate decreases. And you can see differences, significant differences with the little different letters that are on top of the bars. So it seems that caribou don't stay near the highway very much. They move faster to cross the highway, so it seems like maybe the surrounding of the highway is perceived as a risky environment by caribou. They don't seem to stay there that much. This is a direct impact of the highway, but we also wanted to know if we increase intensity, is there a change in the behavior? So we did the same analysis, but by comparing crossings that were made at low traffic densities and high traffic densities. And we saw that movement rate was 140% higher when traffic densities were high. And this was a significant difference. For resource selection, we remember that we did an analysis on every individuals, and we also did analysis in the road buffer zones. So what we saw in the buffer zones is that all vegetation classes were avoided by caribou. So even vegetation classes that were selected elsewhere in the home range, including open lake and woodlands and mature conifer forests. So within this 5-kilometer road buffer zone, there seems to be an avoidance of this, and probably not because of the vegetation class, but maybe more because of the proximity to the highway. However, we didn't find that caribou were found farther away from the road during and after construction sites. So they were not farther away from the road than before. But what we did find is that there were a lower proportion of caribou locations during and after road modifications. So they were not farther away from the road, but there were less locations near the highway in this 5-kilometer zone. So this is a reminder of the main results that we found. I'm not going to repeat this, but I believe we found enough evidence in this study to conclude that the increase in the intensity of the disturbance may translate into stronger behavioral reactions in animals, as we found for caribou and this highway modification. I want to repeat that most caribou were avoiding the highway during the study. So in our small-scale analysis, we were unable to include these caribou, which may be sensitive to the highway. So it's probably even our study is probably underestimating the real impacts of the highway modification for caribou. And our next research project will try to see if there is a relation between if these behavioral reactions by caribou translate to changes to consequences in fitness and survival for the Charlevoix caribou. Thank you.